So yeah, tonight's talk, we're just going to talk about basically healthy tissues and getting them healthy, getting them back to square one, and helping them recover a little bit faster. Because there's some really good tricks to this stuff that if you actually put the time in, the only thing is you need the time. So it's about making it sort of as efficient as possible. So I'll just share the screen. So a little bit of carrying on from last week is we want to sort of, for a start, we want to have great blood. We want to circulate it. We want to have really healthy connective tissues. And we also want to follow nature's rules. So if we get these four things right, it's going to help to give us a healthy organism or a healthy person. And obviously we know that the healthier the person is, the better they're going to perform, the better they're going to recover. And just in general, they're just probably a better human just by being healthier. So probably our first part is having great blood. And so this might seem pretty obvious, but if you got the right amount of electrolytes, like you're getting electrolytes, you're getting water in, you're getting a constant drip of amino acids, your detoxification systems are going pretty well, and your nutrients are really good, it's going to make a big difference. It's like the way I look at it is you can be running like a Ferrari or like a really highly tuned engine, but if the fuel and if the operating systems are no good, then you're still going to perform at 50%, So in terms of things like amino acids, so there's basically anabolic and catabolic, and that's just sort of like a constant protein synthesis and protein breakdown basically goes like this all day long. So as an athlete, you sort of want to be combating that as much as you possibly can, with a constant drip of amino acids throughout the day. And so when you're looking at that, like you want amino acids in the bloodstream sort of before you train, after you train, but also like that constant drip throughout the day. And there's different ways you can do that, but we'll sort of talk about that a bit more later on. With electrolytes, most of it's going to come from your food. So it's not so much like your electrolyte drinks. It's more like you get it from your green veggies, you get it like potassiums and stuff like that from dates, bananas. Ideally getting it from food because it's going to come with other nutrients rather than electrolyte powders and stuff like that, or electrolyte drinks. And then obviously the more nutrients and minerals in your blood, the healthier it's probably going to be. And then just having your detoxification systems running at their best. And so some ways you can sort of tell this is like if you're constantly like getting bad skin or you smell all the time, like just those things that are showing that your detoxification systems are probably not working as well as they should, then it's something to go and look at. And that could be stuff like you might need more sauna, you just might not be drinking enough water, your just systems are overloaded, and that could be either with like environmental stress. So it could be like you live in the city and there's a lot of pollution. Could also be like your body's just not dealing with the amount of crap you're putting in the body. So having that as a good indicator of health can be really good. Um, yeah, cool. Do you get any symptoms like that, like bad skin or?
No, not really.
Yeah.
Nothing stands out to me. My skin's always pretty good.
Yeah. You don't stink too much.
No.
Yeah. It's a real funny one. Like, some people like have a really high protein diet. Sometimes they get that like ammonia smell when they sweat. Um,
Yeah, right.
it's sort of like a weird smell, but I don't think there's actually
Okay.
anything really wrong with it. It just sort of lingers a bit. Um,
Yeah, okay.
but yeah, and sometimes it's like it's just a really good sign. Like if you notice, especially like sometimes with your clients, like if they have like a really bad sweat smell, it could be a sign that their detoxification processes aren't working that well. But it could be
Yeah.
like just a sign that the system's overloaded and it's having to come out somewhere. Um,
Mm,
yeah.
okay.
So great blood is probably the number one, and it's pretty simple, but it's a pretty base level thing that we need to really take into account. And then the next thing is we want to circulate it, because essentially only the dead stop moving. So if your tissues aren't moving, essentially they're dying. But if we're keeping them moving and circulating all the time, it's going to bring in some regeneration and help with that recovery process so much more. And a good way to think about it is like low intensity movement often. So the less we sit, the less we sort of like just do nothing. The more we're moving, even if it's just low intensity type stuff, then it's going to help to circulate that blood all day long, and help with everything, basically getting those nutrients, electrolytes and aminos around the blood, around the body as much as possible. Stuff like your passive circulation is pretty handy as well. You sauna a bit, like when you're back in the city?
Um, Not really. Hey, I'm not very good at using the sauna.
Do you just find it really uncomfortable?
No, it's more just a time thing and just not like I'm a bit lazy and I just don't bother with it.
Yeah.
I do like cold therapy. Like I do cold pool and cold
Just because
showers.
it's a bit quicker?
Yeah.
Yeah. Especially in the summer too, like it's so hot in Brisbane. I
Yeah.
found like this year was the first year I actually tolerated the heat in Brisbane just because I was like saunaing every day.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
I think the sauna makes me quite tired as well, or maybe like it could be to do with that timing what you're talking about with the HRV, but every
Yeah.
time I did sauna, it just felt like it was a stress on my body.
Yeah, okay. And it just sort of stressed you out, like a little bit more loading on the body.
Yeah, like I felt like it was like I had done extra training. Didn't really feel like it was helping my recovery.
Yeah. Yeah. It's definitely something you got to look at, instead of like
Yeah.
just like uh, some people will go do like a massive session, then sit in the sauna for half an hour. And like,
Yeah.
it's okay sometimes, but you're probably better off doing something like that on an actual recovery day, because
Hmm.
it is just another stressor. Like there is some really, really good science coming out on like things like longevity of saunas, stuff
Hmm.
like heat shock proteins, and a lot of like Ben Greenfield and that. Like some of his stuff's not that great, but he uses a lot to improve endurance, and
Yeah.
so it can be really
Okay.
helpful. We got yeah, it can be something that like I'm pretty sure it's similar. Like it has almost a similar effect as like altitude on the body, in terms of like opening up more blood vessels and stuff like that. So it can be something
Yeah.
that can improve performance and endurance
Yeah.
just by being in there. But it needs to be used at the right time.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
and
I need to probably experiment with it a bit more.
yeah, it's something that to look at. Like, and it's you'll know on the day that it's right, because when you use it, you'll be like, "Fuck, I feel good after that."
Yeah.
But then there'll be other days where you're just like dehydrated as fuck, and it's like you just don't feel that good. But like other low intensity movement is like, doing your just general cardio type stuff. Like you don't really have to exercise; it's just moving. Like your 10,000 steps. It's probably like super underrated in terms of recovery. Um, Even stuff like if you're trying to improve your squat, like banded squats, just stuff that's super, super easy, low intensity, but at least you're getting some movement in. Even stuff like animal flow and that, like it can be good just to open up the body. It's probably not good as
Hmm.
a training tool, but as part of a recovery program, it's probably not too bad. I did a little bit yesterday, of sort of like a mace flow. Um, it was actually
Yeah.
quite nice. So like just to move my body and use a bit of like, I guess, integrating the core a little bit. So there was like just
Mm.
get some movement, open up the quads a little bit. My quads have been pretty smashed, so it was quite nice to move actually. And then the next one, oh, did you say something? Sorry.
No, all good. Keep
Okay.
going.
Yeah, sweet. Next one's like our connective tissue. So this is something that can obviously, as you know, like it can hold you back a lot. Like if you got sore joints, you're gonna have to slow down at some point. So what you want to do is make these as strong as possible, and probably for a combination of loading and just like actual bodybuilding type pump work. So that's why with programming for an athlete, eccentric loading is good, because essentially you're loading the tendons, you're loading the muscles under length, so it's creating a stronger connective tissue. But then also like a little bit of volume work as well. So your traditional, I guess, bodybuilding type work, it's flushing that muscle or that joint with a little bit more blood. So that's essentially circulating blood to that area, and it can be really helpful. Like for today, doing like just dumbbell hamstring curls. It's just opened up my hips and my back so much, hey, just by doing lots and lots of reps. And I know that like getting that lengthening under tension with a little bit of load on it, it's starting to just really open up my hips. And it's been really helpful, eh? So isometrics are also really good. I guess as a coach, tendons like to be loaded, but they don't like to be stretched. So, and this is where athletes and sometimes your general pop get into a bit of trouble is like, they might have like a tight hamstring or like, they got a sore quad or a sore back. So they start stretching it. But really, you probably want to use some sort of isometric or some sort of loading to load either the tendon or the muscle so that it just stays a lot more stable and it feels a lot more secure. And then we want to look at also like your range of strength. And because you're a weightlifter and like CrossFitter, obviously you sort of got this covered because you got pretty good range of motion. But making sure that you're strong at each range is super, super important. Say if you're a basketballer, you want to make sure that you're really, really strong with a fully flexed hip and at the end range with your knee as far over your toe as possible, because that's a really it's a movement that they use a lot in basketball, and it's a place that can cause a lot of patella issues and stuff like that. And in terms of like a strength athlete, you probably just like your pauses, your slow, like your eccentric work, all of that stuff's going to help as well to improve that range of strength. Cool. And then obviously just following nature's rules. So nature's smart. We've evolved to like basically be the ultimate sort of animal on the planet because we've evolved to use nature as much as possible. So like even like you said today, like when you get out in the sun, you just feel better.
Yeah.
Pretty straightforward, eh? Like we've been in the sun for bloody hundreds of thousands of years. So our body is designed to sort of use that. Being out in nature as well. So have you found lately, I suppose you're up sort of in the bush, but since I've been going out lately, like just feeling the wind on your skin, it's almost energizing, eh? Like when you've been inside all day.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Definitely.
it just energizes you and refreshes you.
Yeah.
Then obviously like good water is really good, your breath and just connecting to the earth. Like if you follow those rules and do that on the daily, you're going to be more in tune with like, I guess, nature's cycles. And it's just going to help to connect all of that. And it's probably underrated, but it's something that if we follow like evolution over time, we've been designed to basically work really, really well in a certain environment. And so if we can sort of make the most of those environments and work as closely to that as possible, we're probably going to be the best version. Like we're probably going to be able to express our genetic potential, more often than not. So
Yeah.
in terms of like healthy tissues, it all connects and it all adds up. So number one is just having that great blood. So start from the inside out. Make sure that you're getting your nutrients in, you're getting your electrolytes, you got a constant drip of amino acids, and then just make sure that your detoxification systems are working pretty well. It just starts with your food and your water, and then movement basically throughout the day. So what we got is just a couple of examples of like some lower body and upper body tissue recovery. Cool. So let's say you just had like a really, really heavy squat day yesterday, and tomorrow you want to recover your legs a bit more. So first one obviously is getting that blood right. So making sure that you got your electrolytes, your proteins, your carbs, basically all your fueling to aid your recovery. But then what we want to do, we want to essentially work the muscle or the group of the muscles, the body parts that we've been using. But we want to do it with as little eccentric loading as possible so that we can minimize muscle damage, but also create blood flow to the area and still get some movement through the tissues. So stuff that's like really, really low eccentric is stuff like your strongman type stuff. Sleds are brilliant. Probably like the reverse sled drag is probably one of the best quad recovery tools there are. just because like the way it works and like dragging it back, putting all of the like pressure through the front of the quad and like down into the VMO, it's going to be a really good tool to basically flush because you're only using mid-range as well. It's just a small range of movement, but you're constantly contracting that quad, and it's going to help to flush everything out and start their recovery process. Um, and then obviously like pushing a sled as well, that's going to help to recover the hips. So anywhere between like 5 to 10 minutes is going to be really good in terms of like recovery using a sled. And you can go with two options. Like you can go really light and really fast, just like every minute on a minute, you might do 30 meters at like say half your body weight, or you just might go continuous like 10 minutes, like really, really heavy, but something that you can move continuous the whole entire time. I'm pretty sure it's called high intensity continuous training. You can actually do this on a bike. So if you say you had a bike erg, you turn it up to basically the highest gear and you want to do 30 revolutions, so 30 RPM. So really, really low RPM, but because you're just loading the fast twitch fibers, because it's on a high gear, but you're continuously turning over for a long period of time, what you're actually doing is stimulating the fast twitch fibers. So it helps them to recover, but it also improves their fitness. So it's a really good way to basically use a active recovery day, but still improving the fitness and the strength of the fast twitch fibers. So you can do that with heavy sled. You can do it for bike on a high gear. Something like walking backwards up a hill, if you don't have anything, can be like a similar thing. Um, yeah. So basically loading whatever muscle groups you want, using those things like no eccentric loading, but making sure that you're actually actively working the tissue and the muscle of the group that you've used the day before can be massive, eh? Flossing can be really helpful. Have you done much flossing before? Like with the voodoo bands?
I have, yeah, but I haven't used it too much recently, but I've definitely used it in the past.
Yeah, it can be like, especially for the knees and probably
Mm.
potentially for the hips. Something like, say you've got, it might be worth trying with your hips. So basically strapping the um, band around your hips, the voodoo floss, and then just like doing some high rep squats, like just some really nice, slow, controlled squats by
Mm.
restricting that blood flow. But then when you open it back up, it's going to let that blood back in there. So
Mm.
exactly the same process. Like we want to create, like circulate the blood. We want to have good blood in there, and then we just want to move it. So tendons, because they take a while to heal, we want to get as much blood flow into that area as possible. So it can be really helpful as well. And that's
Mm.
just a different way to sort of recover. Um, and that's like resisted movement. So like banded squats can be a good one too. So say you had like heavy front squats the day before, you could do like a band around the hips or like a band around the knees, and just doing like 20 to 30 reps of some really light weights, even if it's like a gentle metcon, like a body weight metcon. And like say you got like 20 air squats in there, but use like a band so that you're actually actively working on your squat mechanics, but you're also improving blood flow to that area. Um, in terms of like using your hips and your abs as well. So it can be pretty massive, which is cool. Treading water is another good one. Have you ever done that one?
No,
So like,
not as a recovery method or anything. No.
yes. So like basically like a way to do it is you put your hands behind your back and you just got to keep your head above the water for like 2 to 3 minutes, just kicking your legs. And it's like, it's actually bloody hard, but it's the
Yeah.
same idea as like the really hard gear on the bike. So it's like you're trying to recover your quads or your legs in general, but you're using the fast twitch fibers because you got to constantly move it and you're increasing the endurance of them, which is pretty cool. But because it's sort of like the goal is 2 minutes continuous, but you can start to work that up as well to like 3 or 4 minutes. And because there's no like loading, because you're in the water, it's really gentle as well, which is pretty cool.
Mm.
And then recovery squats. So this is something I've picked up lately, and it's something that's in your program tomorrow actually. So say you've got a heavy back squat on a Monday, and then on Tuesday, what you'll do is say another variation of a squat. So essentially, like you might use a front squat, but with a really, really long pause so that the load is still quite low, but you're actually getting time in the positions that you want to improve. So the loading's a lot lower, but the intensity is still high, if that makes sense. So it's still tough, but because you're still working through that movement pattern, you're essentially recovering it at the same time as you're improving it. But the load's a lot lower than what you did before. So it's like using daily undulating like periodization. So like a heavier day and a lighter day, same sort of movement, but an actual like different movement pattern. And that recovers it really well. And I was a bit like hesitant on it for a start when I first started like using it, but then I was like, you can see how it just fires everything up again. So it's a really good way to do it. And because I don't know the exact sort of way it works, but there's sometimes like it's just because you're increasing that frequency as well. So you're getting more practice and it's just a really good way to improve and recover squats. Cool. High intensity continuous training, we talked about that. So the opposite of like most of the stuff here is stimulation method. So that's like if you know that you have a low amount of stress in your life. So, you just basically get up, you go to training, you don't really have to worry too much about money, you don't have family and stuff. Then stimulation methods are probably going to help a lot more. But if you do have a bit more stress or you know that you're just like shit on cooked, that's when you want to start to go into your passive type recoveries. You always smile when I talk about like the overwork. It's cool.
I'm a naturally stressed person.
Yeah, it's cool. But yeah, so like maybe for you, it's like it's going to be a lot more breathing work. It's going to be a lot more loaded mobility, a lot more yoga. But you don't really need to improve like your range of motion because you're already pretty mobile. So maybe like some loaded mobility is going to be pretty good, or just some gentle like bear breathing or breath work as well. So working on the breathing mechanics in different positions. Have you ever done a bear breath before?
I don't think so. Doesn't sound familiar.
It's pretty like straightforward. So you're just like in a beast position. So like on your hands and knees, you take your knees slightly off the ground and then you just practice your diaphragmatic breathing. And you can sort of like, you can push yourself back into a squat and just moving forward. So essentially you're practicing your breathing mechanics, but you're also moving for a nice range of motion. So it's helping create stability and improving those mechanics, but also like getting a bit of blood flow and movement through it. So
yeah,
I
have been really like trying to focus on my breathing in my warm-ups and that recently, and with the core stuff and core control, and I think that's helping.
Yeah, it's huge. I think I need to probably add a couple of drills into my own warm-up. Hey, I might just quickly pause this. One good one is, I've used this a bit for runners or people who are like really tight through the thoracic. So one thing is, hold on. It doesn't matter too much. So one thing with like most people is like we've either got an inhalation and an exhalation compensation in terms of like how our diaphragm sits. So it depends on basically the width of your rib cage. I can't remember the exact term, but say you've got a narrow rib cage, it means you've got an exhalation compensation. If you've got a wide one, it means you've got an inhalation compensation. So what that means is like either you breathe in more than you breathe out. So a lot of runners, because they have quite short, sharp breaths, it'll be like, so they're actually like their exhalation is overcompensating for their inhalations. And then it can be the opposite for a lot of people who have an inhalation compensation. So they actually, and they breathe into their lungs a lot more. So where is it? So there's a couple of different ways you can sort of fix that as well. and this comes down into like a lot of the tissue movement stuff as well. So like regenerating in tissues. So if you've got a narrow um, intrafascial or something like that, it's like something like that. But essentially, like doing this. So what we want to do, if you've got a narrow one, we actually want to open up the rib cage a little bit so that there's more space for the diaphragm to expand. So what we want to do is start off with some lazy bear breathing. So essentially on your hands and knees, and then your goal is to expand your ribs as you're breathing. Where if you're at a wider angle, your goal is actually to contract your obliques, so breathing down, because that's going to bring that rib cage in a little bit tighter. Because if you've got the wider one, that means you're probably going to have an extension bias. If you've got a narrow one, you're probably going to have a flexion bias. So that's when you see people who are quite stressed out. They generally have that tight compacted in here. And so opening everything up based off that test is quite handy actually. And it's also, this stuff here is a little bit of stimulation, but it's also a little bit of passive because you're incorporating the breathing into it as well. So the breathing mechanics. So something like a lazy bear, which is just on your all fours and then trying to expand that rib cage. Then some kettlebell arm bars, but bringing in the hip flexion as well. And then just concentrating on either expanding the ribs or contracting the obliques when you're breathing. And so what that's doing is allowing you to reset your diaphragm. And that should actually help with breathing and bracing in terms of your squat mechanics as well. It's something that right now I'm like, shit, I should be doing this because I actually struggle to get that full diaphragmatic breath. Like when I'm in a deadlift, when I'm in a squat, I'm not too bad. But I could probably actually, I'm gonna do some experiments with this actually. Yeah, probably add it into my training because I've got a real extension bias. So if I can bring that diaphragm down a bit, because when I brace, what I do is I'll actually do a deep breath out first and try to contract my obliques. So I'll be like, and when my obliques are contracted, that's when I breathe in, and then I can feel everything tighten up. But I used to just breathe in, and that would not really do too much. But now it's sort of like getting those breathing mechanics going good. Yeah, but so that's like a little bit of a sidetrack, but it's something that is passive, but also a bit of stimulation work because you're opening everything up at the same time, but you're also connecting the breath work and your breathing and bracing mechanics to your body. So it's a really good way to do it. Where are we? Cool. Yeah. So, and then the upper body, like it's pretty much the same. Like just doing banded pull aparts. Anything like with the shoulders is like you just want to be doing a lot of reps, and you got to figure out what it is. Like, do you need internal or external rotation? Most weightlifters, because you're doing external rotation all the time, you probably need a little bit more internal rotation, and that's why like bench press and stuff can be really helpful in a weightlifter's program. With CrossFit, like you're doing a lot of push-ups, a lot of burpees and stuff, so it probably balances out. But what I noticed was when I was doing CrossFit, because of the high amount of Olympic lifting, like my shoulders were always good. Because in general, like I've always had a fairly strong bench, but doing the Olympic lifting, I didn't need to do any external rotation work. But if you're someone who doesn't have a necessarily strong bench and you're a good Olympic lifter, you probably need to do a bit more internal rotation. So doing some banded work could help, but that's only if your shoulders fatigue out quite a lot as well. Sled pulls, so once again, like the farmer's carry stuff. So just some really fast like sled pulls, or it could be some really heavy tension sled pulls. And same rules apply as like your sled drags or sled pushes. You either go light and fast just for like a lot of reps, or you just go heavy and continuous for a long period of time. Depending on sort of where you're at, probably more so light and fast if you're just feeling like you just need a bit of blood flow work. But if you feel like shit, my body's starting to feel potentially a little bit sore, then you probably want to get that heavy loading to basically work those fast twitch fibers, but bring some blood flow into them and also increase their fitness as well. And that's why strongman training is pretty good as accessory type work. Can you see this? Yeah, now you can see it.
Yeah.
Yeah, cool. So that's why like the strongman stuff is as good as accessory work, because you're just loading everything without that eccentric loading, so you don't get as much muscle damage, but it's still improving the fitness and the capacity to work of those muscles. One way that I use for like our sharing athletes is you'll do a stimulation day. So it'll be something similar to this, where it might be just some tempo squats, but more so like slow up, slow down. So it's not too heavy, it's not too intense. And then you'll have basically what is it, a development day. So that's when you either go heavy or you do a hard conditioning piece. And then you do your active like high performance recovery. So it's sort of stimulation to get the muscles or the whatever energy system, you get that stimulated. Then you do your development day, which is your higher level stuff. So sort of like your 8 to 10 out RPE. And then your active recovery or your high performance recovery stuff is a bit more of this stuff where you're doing like your sleds, just getting that blood flow and getting things moving again. And it makes a real big difference. And in terms of like mobility, for me, I believe like loaded mobility is going to beat passive mobility any day of the week. Like if you're doing heavy squats, you're gonna improve your range in general. It depends on the type of squat, depends on your hip structure. But if you're doing a heavy loaded, even just a loaded goblet squat, and you're spending time at the bottom, you're gonna improve your hips and your ankle mobility just by being down there. In terms of like stuff like your overhead stuff, if you're really, really tight, like doing heaps of band and heaps of passive stretching is good, but you're probably better off doing something like a dumbbell pullover to just load that thoracic extension. Some of that stuff we were just talking about in terms of like, sorry, the diaphragmatic stuff, like just getting that actually moving, but actually like loading that end range can make a big, big difference. It really depends on who you are. Like for you, it's just making you more stable at that end range is probably going to be the big thing. But if you've got a really, really tight athlete, some of the easiest wins are just loaded mobility, because it's going to force them to get into that position, and then obviously working through that range and increasing that length, strength at length. So it does make a big, big difference. And probably in terms of like even gym pop, like stuff like a loaded, really, really long ATG split squat is going to be massive for opening up the hips. Just spending a lot of time in that area. Yeah, battle ropes and stuff are pretty good as well in terms of, because like there's no concentric, but it has to be pretty light. Like some of those heavy ones can just fatigue you quite a bit. Yeah, cool. So out of all of this, essentially, like what you got to do is figure out what you need on the day. Obviously, work with your coach or work with whoever you're going to work with, and basically assess. You can either use like a readiness, was it like a readiness survey, or you can use your HRV, or you can use some sort of just basically go on feel. So it's like if you're feeling that you are really, really stressed out or just overwhelmed, anxious, you feel like there's just a lot of stress in general, then you probably want to go with more to passive type work. But if you're feeling like, shit, I just feel a bit fucked, then probably like a stimulation method is probably going to help to stimulate that recovery. And that's why it's almost better to train every day if you can tolerate it. And that just comes into like clever loading and using undulating periodization and a little bit of like the conjugate style, where you're not just loading the same movement pattern every single day. It can sort of allow you to recover more often, because you're getting the same principles in. You're getting blood flow, you're getting movement, and you're improving the quality of the connective tissues. And it's just constantly like you're getting that frequency in throughout the week. So even if your loading's lower, because you're getting the frequency into practice, plus those rules of like blood flow, improving the connective tissue, you're going to improve a lot faster over time, even if it's less. So, and then ideally, like you just build up your tolerance, and the more tolerance you've got, obviously, the higher you can sort of push. It's just a bit of time and a bit of push and pull, really, with it all.
Mm.
What would your sort of go-to recovery be at the moment?
At the moment, it's like some sort of movement. It's a walk or a bike ride or a swim, I guess.
Yeah. Do you incorporate it into your warm-ups at all? Like recovering you from the day before?
Um, with like which stretches I choose to do, yes.
Okay, cool.
So if I've done something which is like tightened up my hips or calves or something, then I'll just spend a bit more time mobilizing that,
Yeah.
or a bit longer warming that up, or like getting blood there.
Yeah. I'll send you this video that because I was working with the girl that's been helping me with my hips. She took me through like a mentor call. And it was just about sort of like essentially her her system for getting the body ready to train. So she always starts with activation, then she goes mobilization, then she goes strengthening. So it's like you activate the muscles first because you're getting that blood flow into the tissues, but you're also making them more stable. And then you can see if you need the mobility. But sometimes when you go mobility first, because whatever you're trying to stretch or whatever, you're not actually working the I guess the thing that's actually causing that. So
Yeah.
say you're trying to stretch your hip flexors, you might be better off trying to activate your hip extensors.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's like say like for example, say you've got a tight lower back, and when you go into flexion, all you need to do is do extension work to bring that back into line. But if you're sore when you go into extension, you need to do more flexion work or more of anterior loading work. So like
Yeah.
McGill curl ups, side planks, shoulder taps and stuff. And it's just like bringing that in and the activation work, and then like if you need the mobility after that, then it's sort of that's when you bring it in. It can be a little bit more efficient in terms of time. Um, and especially if you're already feeling mobile. But it might be like, okay, did you do the testing, like the ankle test and stuff like that?
I did some of them.
Yeah. Was there anything you failed on?
I think my ankles are a little bit different.
Oh yeah, left to right.
I confirm that. Need to test them. What else was there? I think
Quads are okay.
yeah, I think I passed everything.
Yeah, cool. So like essentially like passing most of them is like you're pretty good to go. It's just probably going to be more of that activation work, and then that's going to help to like create stability, but it's also going to work out what you it's going to warm up what you actually need. So say you know like your hip flexors are always either aching or always tight, it's probably because either the abs are doing more work or the hips aren't doing enough work, like your hip extensors aren't doing enough work. So activating those two before you start, it might actually take a bit of stress off the hip flexors and allow them to sort of recover. And that's where like doing this stuff as well, like instead of potentially stretching the hip flexors because they're tight, it might be the opposite of, you know, because you're going to get a passive stretch when you activate or use the hip extensors, you're going to get a passive stretch on the hip flexors anyway. So it's just slightly probably more efficient.
Yeah.
It's also like what it's also doing is making you stronger, but also improving your recovery and your mobility at the same time. So it's pretty cool, and I think it's something that for me I believe a lot of people probably get a little bit wrong in terms of like they spend a lot of time mobilizing. When generally if your strength program is on point, it should be improving your mobility anyway.
Yeah.
So it's more so like, do you need if you're super tight, like you're someone that like can't touch the back of their head or something, then 100%, like you need to get in position. But if you're already pretty good, you probably just need to activate and get that blood flow working. And then as you do your movements, you're probably going to warm up to it anyway. And that might save you like a little bit of time as well.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, cool. Does that make sense on all of this stuff?
Yeah, it makes sense. Yeah, and I think I go through sort of phases where I forget that and remember that. Like,
yeah.
I've definitely stopped stretching my hips now, and like doing the activation stuff has been a lot better.
Yeah.
Yeah, because of that whole thing of the front of the hip capsule being tight as well, and
yeah,
stretching and really just pushing more into it. So, yeah.
No, it's all pretty straightforward, eh? Like it's just the basics really, but it's once again, it's those little things that they all add up to the big things. And it's like, we'd love to just, snatch, we'd love to just do muscle ups, but if we don't do these little things, it just like, it makes everything a little bit harder. Just that touch harder, eh? And it's like,
yeah,
and it's only, and that's why like being efficient with it all is really handy. So let's say like, if you can start to work out or work in, ideally like with the programming anyway, like you had a heavy day the day before. So it's just about recovering those squats so that, when you get back to your squats, your legs are fresh and they're good to go. And it's the same with like any of your overhead stuff. You just want to activate it, you want to train it, and then you want to recover it. And then you're basically on the right track. So it's about working all of those, I guess, those three things, and then just working in these little things to make everything line up as much as possible.
Have you ever tried doing like that concentric loading stimulation stuff the morning of a training session that you're like wanting to recover for?
Say again, like explain.
So, for example, if you're trying to recover from heavy squats the day before and you do sled push, have you ever tried doing the sled push the morning of another training session?
Like another leg session, for example?
Yeah. So just try and recover your legs for that afternoon.
Yeah, that's exactly what I did today.
Yeah.
I should have filmed it actually. I've filmed half of the exercise. So what I did today, like yesterday, I knew my quads were tight, and like they have been, just because like I've been squatting and my squat's been going up and up and up, but my hinging hasn't sort of been matching it. So I know that my hips are starting to tighten up a bit. But anyway, so what I did today, like I probably had to spend 15 minutes on it. I just did like sled push for 5 minutes, reverse sled drag, sled push, and then I done some mid-range high reps. So essentially like a Patrick step up or a Poliquin step up, where you just got your foot up on the thing, just drop your heel down, just do like 50 reps until the quads, like you can almost feel them start to lengthen a little bit. Then I did some like potato sack squat and stuff like that, just to lengthen it out. I did a little bit of reverse Nordics. I foam rolled for about 30 seconds, just to see if it would help. But I actually found that once I sort of got a bit more blood in there, and once I actually warmed up my hips a little bit more, once my glutes started to fire up, then my quads and my like hip flexors weren't working as much. But it definitely helped 100%. Yeah.
Okay.
And it's probably more so like I knew I had to recover my quads before I started my squat session today.
Yeah.
But if they were good, I wouldn't worry about it. I'd just do my normal hip warm up because my hips are probably the weaker link. But and then so I knew like if I got the blood flow to the hips, they're generally pretty good. But I knew today that like unless I got blood flow to those quads, then I was going to really struggle. If that makes sense.
Yeah, cool. So you did that in the morning and then did your squats in the afternoon?
I did it before my squat session. So.
Oh, okay. So like as a warm up.
Yeah. Like I had to add on about 10 or 15 minutes extra to my warm up, but it made a big difference.
Okay.
Like essentially, like I got 2 warm ups now. Like one's lower body hip warm up, and my other one's just the upper body external rotation sort of stuff, just for my like pressing, because my external rotators are not as strong. And it has made a big difference actually. So like essentially I just go between those two. But then like, for example, today I knew I needed a little bit more, my quads were just locked up because I'd been squatting and sitting a lot. So yeah, just it made a big difference, eh?
Yeah, okay, cool.
That's sort of just what you got to assess on the day. Like, do you need it today or do you not, you know? And then you just work from there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Upper body is, I found like a deep push up can be really helpful. Like, like as like, because I'm doing a lot of bench. If you've been doing a lot of volume on something like a bench press, even potentially like any overhead work, just really like doing a deep, slow push up. Like even on plates and just opening up those shoulders can be quite helpful. That's why stuff like dips and that are pretty good. Because they're just really opening up everything, and that's where loaded mobility, like dip, is essentially like a loaded shoulder mobility drill. You know, and stuff like that. Dumbbell pullovers, anything to sort of get the blood flow away. That's what you want, and then just to increase that range is going to be helpful. So one test that we used to do, like a nervous system sort of test, is like if you know that like when you just do a standing pike, and normally like when you're fresh you can touch your toes with a flat palm. If it's like on the day you can only just touch your toes with your fingertips, then it's like, okay, I'm probably a little bit tighter, I'm going to need a lot more warm up. Or it might be like, okay, your nervous system's really wound up today, you might need a bit more passive work to start off with. Those are good things. Like I don't know if they're as accurate as something like HRV or something like that, but yeah. I have heard of people like using the grip test as well.
Yeah, I've heard that one.
Yeah, like it's just little things, that essentially like give you feedback that you're tired. But yeah, sometimes it's like, yeah, I think like most of the time you can push through. It's just about knowing like, are my tissues ready to train? Because essentially you want your joints and your muscles, like you don't want to get injured. So it's just making sure they're ready to train, and then everything else just sort of falls into place as long as your technique and your bracing and stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's massive, eh? I think probably one of my biggest ones at the moment, like I struggle to drink a lot of water. Like I think roughly I need probably about 4 liters of water a day, just sort of based off body weight and stuff. Especially in the summer, I probably need a bit more because I just sweat a lot, and I notice it a lot when I'm dehydrated. Yeah, but that's just another part of it, eh?
Yeah, it's a lot to remember to do each day.
Yeah, and that's why it's like, it's about just making it really simple. It's like, make sure for a start, you're putting the right things into your body so that the blood's good. Then you just want to circulate it. So like constantly be move the areas that you need to. What was it? Ido Portal, he sort of said, like, we get better at the things that we do. So if you're not moving, you get better at not moving. If you're constantly moving, you get better at moving. So if you sit still all day, you're going to be a stiff, real tight board, because that's what the body thinks it needs to do. But if you're constantly moving all day, your body's going to get better at moving, you know. And then just connective tissue stuff, it's more about whether you need, do you need to lengthen it or do you need to stabilize it, eh? For like workers, or people who are like just workaholics, or, you know, like have high levels of stress.
Yeah.
Letting go of that control so that like it's okay to relax. Some people that freaks out a lot. It's really interesting.
Yeah, it's hard to stop working.
Yeah. Is that bored, or you're just trying to?